Is that a minority? I think it's a minority.
Sports games are a dime a dozen nowadays, aren't they? Every year another Madden, every year $60 wasted. But hey, no shade. Back in the day, I was right there with you. No, not with Madden or NBA 2K, whatever. Nah. My sports game of choice was Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. The Tony Hawk series is, no joke, one of my favorite video game franchises of all time. And with the release of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2 coming out earlier this month, and the fact that I can't go outside and skate in RL, now really is the perfect time to jump right back into this franchise. And on my channel, I always seem to focus on this side of the background, but never really focus on this side of the background. So, to celebrate this franchise's triumphant return, I want to offer my retrospective on the history of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. Part 1. Pre-Pro Skater. When I was about 7 years old, I got my first video game console, the Nintendo 64. I had an NES and an SNES in the house, so I decided to stick with what I knew. But I really couldn't get past the wonky controller. Seriously, it feels like this thing was designed for someone to play with their dick as a third hand. So for the following Christmas, I gifted my sister the N64 in exchange for a Sony PlayStation, and my grandma got me 2 games, Crash Bandicoot and Crash Bandicoot 2 Cortex Strikes Back, as well as a PS1 demo disc. My history with Crash Bandicoot is a story for another day, if y'all are interested in that. But for now, for the purposes of this video, I'm gonna focus on that demo disc, because there was a game on that demo disc that would change my life forever. Matt Hoffman's Pro BMX. Yeah, I don't remember much about that game either, and I don't really know why I was drawn to it, but I played that demo so much that my grandma actually went out and bought me the full game. And right when I opened that pre-cracked jewel case, I was greeted by the inner booklet's advertisement for Activision 02. And upon seeing that there was a skateboarding game, well, I couldn't contain my excitement. Wait, there's a skateboarding game? Well, fuck this! To my surprise, it was actually an advertisement for Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2. I don't remember the first Tony Hawk game being advertised so much when I was a kid, but I definitely knew who Tony Hawk was. I played Skate or Die on the NES, and I loved watching skaters in the OC in New York in the mid to late 90s. And Tony Hawk was everywhere. For those of you who don't know, but seriously, who doesn't know this guy? Tony Hawk is a professional skateboarder who rose to prominence in the 80s and 90s. Let's put it this way. If the Z-Boys popularized skateboarding, Tony Hawk legitimized it. Some skaters didn't like that Tony was quote-unquote a sellout, but looking into the guy, I don't think he was really in it for the money. He just loved skateboarding and wanted to share what he loved with the world. He set up charities to bring skate parks to kids in low-income areas, and was even on the forefront of getting skateboarding into the Olympics, further legitimizing it as a real sport. But it didn't stop there, because in 1999, thanks to Activision and Neversoft, Tony Hawk would not just be immortalized in the real world, but in the virtual one. Part 2. The games. The first Tony Hawk's Pro Skater was released in September 1999 to rave reviews. To be honest though, I don't have much of a history with this particular entry. I didn't play the first Tony Hawk until well after I played the later games, but I'd be remiss if I didn't at least talk about it a little bit. A lot of the staples of the series were already present in this first entry. Grinding, flip tricks, grab tricks, gaps, and a hilarious amount of blood when your character would bail. Though strangely, manuals are nowhere to be found in this game, making huge point combos nearly impossible to the casual player, but definitely a challenge to the most hardened veteran. But for the time, the graphics are solid, the controls are tight, and the design is impeccable, with levels and gameplay that's still remembered fondly to this day. And it set the trend of kick-ass soundtracks for this series going forward, introducing many a young ear to Goldfinger. Sadly, I found Goldfinger for the first time in the Not Another Teen Movie soundtrack, but I got there. You're also given a list of goals to complete in your 2-minute run during the loading screen. Getting the high score, collecting letters that spell out skate, and achieving the secret tape placed in a precarious, hard-to-reach location. All of which unlock a lot of cool 144p full-motion video of the legendary skateboarders and their even more fantastical bails. So, due to the critical and financial success of this game, the following year, we got, arguably, one of the greatest video game sequels of all time. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2. Now that's what I'm talking about, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2. If he was the skater boy, I said see ya later boy. He wasn't good enough for me. This is the superstar slamming on his guitar. Virtually everything about this game surpasses the original. Tighter controls, better levels, and an even better soundtrack. This was my first Tony Hawk game, and I will forever associate Guerrilla Radio by Rage Against the Machine, whom this game introduced me to, with the franchise. All the goals are there, the high scores, the secret tape, but with the introduction of the greatest achievement in gaming, Ollie the Magic Bum. What? You're telling me you didn't try to ollie over your local Nick Nolte impersonators after playing Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2? Just me? Still not convinced? Then I see there's no pleasing you. But whereas in the first game, you can unlock 2 relatively generic secret skaters, this game gave you fucking Spider-Man. At the time, Activision and Neversoft developed a Spider-Man game using the same engine from Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2. And, despite some dated graphics,
hey Black Cat, what's going on?
The game is still fondly remembered to this day. So, Neversoft added a billboard for Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 and Spider-Man.
Tony Hawk! Hey, I skated with that guy.
And added Spider-Man as a secret character for Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2. I played this game so much as a kid that this is actually my second copy. Even after I would play the later entries, I kept coming back to this one because of how addictively fun it is. I remember playing this for hours with my friends as a kid, doing horse, graffiti, or just trying to beat each other's scores. I didn't have the greatest childhood, but man, I really cherish my memories with Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2. It was actually because of this game that I started skateboarding. Man, I remember going to the Van skate park when I was a kid with my friends in the block of Orange, spending the whole day there, just trying to find the slightest bit of courage to drop in on even the smallest quarter pipe. I was far from the best skater there, but I still had the time of my life. I remember back in the day, Tony Hawk was actually there skating, and I got to watch him from the balcony where I took breaks. And not just Tony Hawk, I loved watching all the skaters from the balcony and just felt this sense of belonging. Like, it didn't matter who we all were. It didn't matter what race, gender, orientation, anything was. We all had skating. And when we were ready to go home, my friend's mom would pick us up and the entire car would smell from the sweat from our helmets and knee pads. And when we weren't jamming out to Ocean Avenue by Yellowcard, we were jamming out to all the songs from Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 that my friend just burned onto a CD. And when we got home, we just played some more Tony Hawk. I'll never forget that. I really miss that, actually. In any case, after the clear success of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, and with some new consoles on the horizon, it was only a matter of time until we got the sequel that jumped into the next generation, which is what we got with Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3. And yes, I'm well aware that they made ports of Tony Hawk 3 on the PlayStation and the N64, the latter being the final game ever released for the system. But clearly the next-gen versions were superior in almost every way. This is another one of those cases where I didn't really play this one or Tony Hawk 4 until a little bit later because I couldn't afford a PlayStation 2. But, unlike Pro Skater 1, I did actually go back and play this a little bit more often. I would do this thing when I was younger where that I would go back to the beginning and play all the Tony Hawk games in order, trying really hard to get into Tony Hawk 1, but usually skipping right to 2. Either way, Pro Skater 3 is notable not just for its improved graphics, but for the introduction of probably the most influential trick in the franchise, the revert. I know, it's not as glamorous as the Christ Air or the Sack Tap, but the revert was the greatest asset in order to pull off combos. Being able to launch into the air, do a flip or a grab trick, coming down, reverting into a manual to pull off a seamless combo. This game also introduced a new skater that would become my young dumb brain's go-to character for the franchise going forward. Bam Margera. Dude, this is so fucking embarrassing, but when I was a kid, I looked up to Bam Margera. I loved Jackass and Viva La Bam, and I watched all of his crappy CKY home videos and his movie Haggard on a fucking loop. I can't really pinpoint why I looked up to Bam Margera. Maybe it was his I don't give a fuck attitude, or his gothic skater punk style, or the fact that he was able to beat his dad on camera without consequence. Boy oh boy, God only knows how much I fucking would have loved to do that. And, no joke, his cutscene in Tony Hawk's Underground is why I started skating for Element.
I'm gonna have to put you on Element, bottom line.
I wonder what Bam's up to now. Is it bad? Well, let's get back to Pro Skater 3 before I get depressed. This time around, our secret characters were Wolverine, Darth Maul, and our favorite enchanted vagabond, Ollie, as well as Doomguy, if you played on PC. It's also the first game to feature the ability to change the gender of your custom character. As for the soundtrack, the ones that stand out to me in retrospect were Blitzkrieg Bought by the Ramones and 96 Quite Bitter Beings by CKY, but other than that, I really don't remember much from the soundtrack or about their levels for that matter. Not to say that they were bad because of the clear graphical upgrade, but again, I really didn't play this one. One final note before we move on is Pro Skater 3 was the first game to feature online multiplayer. And while I never partook in Pro Skater 3 Online, the Tony Hawk Online multiplayer holds a very special place in my heart for a later entry. But I'm getting ahead of myself here. Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4. This game, while only slightly building on the third gameplay-wise, is actually seen as a bit of a turning point for the franchise. For one, you are no longer beholden to the 2-minute timer. Instead, each of your goals are given to you by an NPC, making them more like missions rather than traditional goals. It was a neat way to mix it up, without losing the core essential of what this franchise is. Usually an NPC will set up some silly, nonsensical anecdote about why they have you complete these specific tasks.
Help my husband! He tried to get a picture, but he fell over the rail, and the sea lions aren't very happy about it.
And as the game goes on, they get a little ridiculous.
Oh no, my cat's stuck in a tree. Collect Skate, and maybe he'll come down.
The maps were also greatly expanded, further refining the series' impeccable level design. I distinctly remember the carnival as a standout, and the silly goat that's just hanging around. Alright, as for the secret characters this time, you get Jango Fett, Eddie, the mascot from Iron Maiden, and Mike Vallely, who would become a regular character starting with the next game. Even more trick extensions made combos even easier and more fun to pull off. With the addition of the spine transfer, Skitchin, which is you Marty McFlying on the bumper of a car, and leveling out, which was imperative if you shot off a ramp with no place to land. But if this game refined the gameplay mechanics of the franchise up to this point, then the next game nearly perfected it. Tony Hawk's Underground. Now, arguably, this is the pinnacle of the Tony Hawk franchise, and, besides Pro Skater 2, is the fan favorite. And is it still deserving of all that love and adoration nearly 17 years post-release? Hell yes. Holy shit, 17 years? The obvious difference? Instead of playing the game as one of the pros, you play as your custom character, going from street punk to pro over the course of the game's story mode. Yeah, you heard that right. Story mode. And you know what? It's actually really fun and engaging. No, it's not The Last of Us or Uncharted levels of storytelling, but it's exceptional for what it is. It doesn't take itself too seriously, and it follows the same basic idea of Pro Skater 4, where you globetrot and talk to locals, completing goals, upping your stats, and engaging in a wide variety of colorful characters.
Finally, Stacy has sent over a pupil. My fusion of ancient Japanese cooking techniques and modern foods has won him over. And now I
Oh no. Oh, and look, the goat is back. And this cop seems to be really enjoying it. Weird. And the story mode is fun, if a little derivative. You play as, well, you. Granted, if you're a dude. You and your childhood rival, Eric, one of the biggest douchebags in gaming history, start as poor skaters in a trashy New Jersey town and journey to become a pro skater, starting with you receiving a new board from Chad Muska and getting your first sponsor in classic skater, Stacy Peralta. The ambition in this game is laudable, and it just works on nearly every level. The tricks are further refined, introducing acid drops, hip transfers, and, most importantly, the ability to run around without your skateboard. But it's not without its faults. For example, like Arkham Knight, the driving sequences, while adding some variety, really make you wish you can go back to the regular gameplay. And while the other 4 games are typically seen as an arcade-style game, this one's a little bit more of an RPG. It also featured some of the coolest secret characters this time around, with Iron Man, pre-MCU, and the entire band of Kiss, who also appear performing a concert in the level Hotter Than Hell. Fucking rad. But my favorite part about this game when I was a kid was the online multiplayer. God, I sunk so many hours into that multiplayer after school. See, this game came out a few months before my family upped and moved from California to Wisconsin, when I was about 11 or 12 years old. I was this little skater punk kid from Southern California who barely had any friends to begin with, so when I moved to Wisconsin, I was pretty much an outsider. With my musical interests and my dream of pursuing acting and content creating, I was quickly outcast by many of my peers. And as much as I hated school because I never fit in, I couldn't wait to go home, go down to the game room in the basement, wait that excruciating amount of time for the PS2 to connect to the internet via Ethernet, and go online and skate with my clan. Oh yeah, back in the day, Tony Hawk had this online community where people would meet up, become friends, and create their own in-game skate team. I remember we would meet up and do some friendly challenges with other groups online. Dude, I'm telling you, it was so much fun. And now thinking about it, Tony Hawk and Rock Band were the best virtual escapes for me when I was in middle and high school. I really miss those days. I cherished every moment. I can't really remember anyone's names or usernames from back in the day, but if you remember me and you somehow come across this, you really saved me. And I'm really thankful for all the times we played together. Alright, enough of the sappy bullshit. Tony Hawk's Underground 2. Tony Hawk's Underground 2 was the first game released since my transplant to Wisconsin, and though I didn't have the same experience with it as I did with Tony Hawk's Underground 1, for little 12-year-old me, this really scratched the itch for a new Tony Hawk game. But does it hold up as well as the first Underground game? Not really. I know a lot of people took issue with the cartoony design or the bizarre gross-out humor that was present throughout, but I'd argue that attitude has kind of always been in the Tony Hawk games, with characters called Ollie the Magic Bum and Officer Dick, and the hilarious Mortal Kombat levels of blood whenever you bail. Ironically, the reason it worked for me in 2004 is why it doesn't work for me in 2020, and that's the story. The plot sees your character from Underground 1 being kidnapped by Tony Hawk and my boy, Bam Margera, who, along with other pro skaters, as well as Bam's underwear-clad dad Phil, embark on a quote, world destruction tour. And the game was less about pro skating as it was a Jackass Viva La Bam style game, with Bam, Steve-O, and Wee Man being playable characters. And this was before the officially licensed Jackass video game, where Bam is strangely absent due to licensing issues. Though now in 2020, it's making me want to do a rewatch of Jackass and Viva La Bam. Anyway, they spice up the gameplay by adding a fun but dumb variant of the wall plant, where you create a custom decal and do a sticker slap. They also added the dumbest trick in skating history, the Natus spin, which I found out only recently was a real trick, but I doubt it looked anything like this. There's some fun secrets like, wait, there's that goat again, and there's a guy dancing in front of it. What the hell is happening? The novelty skaters this time around are weird. You could play as Phil Margera, Bigfoot, and Shrek, as well as Steve-O, a handicapped misogynistic kid named Polly, and everyone's favorite Nazi fucker, Jesse James. What, you don't remember Jesse James? That's alright, neither does anyone else. And even though I didn't hate this game, it left a lot to be desired. And even little Matt thought so. One good thing is that this game's soundtrack actually introduced me to both Johnny Cash and Disturbed, so there's that at least. Unfortunately, the next few years of my young life were filled with hardship and sadness, and I fell into a deep depression. My parents fought, among other things, about financials, and I was constantly bullied in school, and I longed for California. I felt so lost and alone. I found solace in movies, music, and these video games. And it was around the time that Tony Hawk's American Wasteland was released, where I was at my lowest point. Now, I'm fully aware that American Wasteland is not the most fondly remembered Tony Hawk game. Everyone's pretty much in agreement that it definitely isn't the worst, but it's far from the best. And people often point out the blatant lie on the back of the cover that claims that this game has no loading, when in actuality, the loading screens are covered up by these bland corridors between levels. But here's the twist. Tony Hawk's American Wasteland is my absolute favorite entry in the entire series. I am well aware that Underground and Pro Skater 2 are better, I get that. And that this game, unlike the others where you're globetrotting and there's various locations, this one just has specific cities in Los Angeles. But here's where my completely biased opinion shines through. That's why I love it. This game was released in 2005, at the peak of me missing Southern California, and with the perceived open world Los Angeles, this game was the closest thing to going home that I had. especially taking into account that my childhood skate park, the Van Skate Park, was recreated 1-to-1 in the game. This is gonna sound pathetic, but when I played the game for the first time in 2005 and I unlocked the Van Skate Park, I burst into tears and I wouldn't leave and continue the game. Before American Wasteland was released when I lived in Wisconsin, I tried to recreate the Van Skate Park in the previous games with the tools that they provided to the best of my ability, but they did it better than I ever could. My only gripe is that they say that the skate park is in downtown LA, when in actuality it's in Orange, hence why I would frequent it so much. I played this fucker so much that this is actually my third copy. The story is basically the same from Underground 1, where you're the skater punk from a dingy town who befriends and impresses the locals on his way to becoming a pro skater. Swap out the levels and Stacy Peralta for Tony Alva and the fictional Iggy Van Zant, and you practically have the same game, with the destruction elements and sticker slapped added from Underground 2, as well as a new graffiti element. Sure, it's derivative, but I don't care. This is my guilty pleasure. Plus, any game that says that Pearl Harbor sucks holds a very special place in my heart.
Way to take care of that Hoofleck tool. Man, he sucked in Pearl Harbor.
On top of that, you can now ride a bike and do parkour to climb to hard to reach places like, okay, what the fuck is up with this goat shit? Is Tony Hawk into goats? You know what? It's probably best that I don't ask. As for the music, it's fucking kick-ass this time around. They got a lot of modern punk bands and had them cover some classic punk rock tunes, like My Chemical Romance's cover of Astro Zombies by the Misfits, The Network, who's really a Green Day side project, doing a cover of Teenagers from Mars by the Misfits, and Census Fail's cover of Institutionalized, which, fun fact, I used my first major video on this channel, and it's the sole reason that I can't monetize my repo review. And speaking of Green Day, not only is Holiday also on the soundtrack, but the frontman Billy Joe Armstrong is a secret playable character. And guys, say what you want about Green Day, I know there's 10 times better bands out there, but I can't help but to love them. And now that I live in LA, and know what these areas actually look like in person, for the time, I think they did a pretty respectable job recreating these areas in a condensed way. Again, I know my opinion is incredibly biased, but when I was in that cheesy prison that was Wisconsin, this was my way of going home. I didn't expect to get so emotional talking about Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. Sadly, this was the last game in the franchise that I have such fond memories of. And, as the forgotten band New Found Glory would say, it's all downhill from here. Tony Hawk's Project 8. Now here's the thing. I don't know if I ever finished this game. I was just so uninterested and put off by the design, as well as the bizarre nail a trick mechanic that reminded me more of Skate than a Tony Hawk game. Look, there's nothing wrong with innovation. That's why Underground 1 is so beloved. But, I don't know. I guess it just wasn't for me. I distinctly remember that at the time, I got really into the Kingdom Hearts games, and I took way more of an interest in film, so I guess the Tony Hawk series just fell by the wayside for me. But this isn't a full-on retrospective of the Tony Hawk series. This is my history with the franchise, and I just don't have a whole lot to say about this one. But the secret skaters were actor Jason Lee and Blink-182 drummer Travis Barker, so there's that. Tony Hawk's Proving Ground. Guys, you know this game left little to no impression on me when the only thing I remember about it was that horrible earworm that was Secret Crowds by Angels and Airwaves. That song is ass. But from what I can recall from the recesses of my brain, it was pretty much the same as Project 8, except there's a nail the grab and nail the manual bullshit, and Eric returns from the Underground games as a character foil. Also, they kinda went half-assed with the RPG stuff. In previous games, you could choose a preference with street or vert skate styles, and being either normal or goofy-footed. But this time around, there were 3 classes? Career, which gives you the aforementioned nail the crap. Rigger, where you're basically a street skater who can manipulate your environment to your advantage. And Hardcore, where you're a douchebag who punches people. This was also the last game in the series to be published by Neversoft, before the franchise got its anus torn open by Robomoto, but ha! We'll get there. It was also the final game in the series to feature my childhood hero, Bam Margera. God, that sounds so lame saying that now. But after mine, as well as other fans' lackluster response to Project 8 and Proving Ground, nothing would prepare us for the absolute shit show that was Tony Hawk Ride. For the first time in franchise history, after Proving Ground, there wasn't a Tony Hawk game the very next year. Presumably, Neversoft traded hands of the franchise to Robomoto, and Activision, after seeing the success of peripherals on the Nintendo Wii, got to work on what would be the proverbial coffin in this once beloved franchise. The idea was cool enough, a motion sensor skateboard that you can hop on for use in the game. And I remember, after taking a year off of the Tony Hawk franchise, I was hyped. I had moved back to California at this point, and I was getting back into the skating scene. And my stupid 17-year-old self thought he could relearn a few things on this fucking thing. And to quote Doc Brown, this damn thing doesn't work at all. And I don't mean that this thing is just hard to use. It literally doesn't fucking work. It's completely unresponsive. Fuck. Fuck. God damn it. Part 3, my post-Tony Hawk experience. So after Ride, I completely fell off the Tony Hawk bandwagon. I was not only completely disappointed, but I was about to start college, and I moved from racist meth country California to racist fake country Orange County. I completely missed out on Shred, which was even more unresponsive than Ride, if that's even possible, the half-assed digital-only remake of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater HD, and the abysmal, offensively titled Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 5. And, from what I hear, since about 2013, there's been a still active community of fans online who have an Underground 2 mod that has nearly every level from the series in something called Thug Pro, which sounds awesome. I might have to check that out. Which brings me to now, 2020. And what a Tony Hawk Ride level of horrible year this has been. And during my free time during the pandemic, I actually took up skating again, and I saw a minor light at the end of the tunnel. A light that I was very excited but very skeptical about. Part 4, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2. So, in early September, the remake of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2 was released. And before it came out, I was worried. Would it be as bad as Ride or Pro Skater 5? Would it be a terrible cash grab like Pro Skater HD? Would it successfully recapture the nostalgia of the games of which it's based? Most of my fears were quelled when I found out that Robomoto was not involved, and instead the games would be developed by Vicarious Visions, the same people behind the Crash Bandicoot N. Sane trilogy, and Beanox, who gave us Crash Team Racing Nitro Fueled. Then the collector's edition was in my hands and, guys, it fucking slaps. Not only is it a pitch-perfect remake of the original 2 games, which includes all but 3 songs from the original soundtrack, but in glorious HD, and the levels have never looked more vibrant and beautiful. The first thing that happens when you load up the game is that you get an intro video in the style of the original 2 games, set to the classic Guerrilla Radio by Rage Against the Machine. Then your ears are greeted with Goldfinger's Superman for the main menu music. And all the new features are a nice touch. The new songs feel like they belong on the soundtrack, save for maybe one, and the new challenges and trophies are so goddamn fun to achieve. I know that Doom Eternal and Last of Us 2 also came out this year, but damn, this might be my favorite game of the year. Though it's not without its flaws. For one, the Create-A-Skater has unbelievably minimal customization, unlike the customization in some of the previous installments. Like, this is my attempt to make myself and Chris Chan. Meh. But that's an incredibly minor nitpick, because the gameplay is so fucking solid. There's a little more weight to your character this time around, but it's super easy to become accustomed to. And while the game is a remake of Pro Skater 1 and 2, the control scheme is actually more in line with Underground, allowing for double tap grinds, spine transfers, and wall plants. And they adjusted the game accordingly to make up for the new control scheme. And on top of it all, just look at these visuals. Especially Venice is fucking gorgeous. Plus you get to play as Jack Black as Officer Dick. Are you fucking sold yet? I feel safe saying that this is the definitive way to play Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2. And for the first time in over a decade, I'm genuinely excited for the future of this franchise, should they choose to move forward with it. Part 5. Conclusion. Like I said before, Tony Hawk isn't Uncharted, or Doom, or Sonic 06, but I don't think it's trying to be. And that's okay. And I hope this video encourages you to go check them out, if you haven't already. Especially Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2, which sells for less than retail price of a full game for 2 full games. As for me, for better or worse, These games mean so much to me, and will always hold a special place in my heart. For getting me into skateboarding proper, creating some of the greatest childhood memories with my friends, and getting me through the dark times of my young life. These games really inspired me, as well as the real Tony Hawk, who is always a figure that I looked up to, who encouraged me to hold on. But what about all of you? Do you have any similar experiences with Tony Hawk or any other games? What's something that inspired you to keep going? I'm excited to hear your stories. But for now, I'm gonna go watch some skate videos. Be the goat? What's up with this goat shit? Where am I? So you want to know the secret of the goat in the Tony Hawk series, eh? Ryu. What? You don't recognize your fallen idol? MTV's Bam Margera? I'm full of surprises today. I'm gonna make you the greatest of all time. Or dare I say, the goat? Huh? No!